Hey, welcome to the channel. My name is Eric. If you're new to the channel, welcome aboard. If you're one of our regulars that return, thanks so much for watching our videos. So today we're going to talk about, tools and tool storage for you homeowners. And what's the correct way so that you're not going to see me that often. Why am I making a video on trying to make it so you don't see me that often? Well, there's simple tricks and tips that will help you when it comes to doing just that. And the first is simply, if you're not going to be using a piece of equipment, whether it be a weed eater, chainsaw, for long periods of time, then what I recommend is to take and dump all the fuel out of your fuel tank. And this is your handhelds, your chainsaws, your weed eaters, so forth. You can't do that with a lawnmower and a snowblower. You try and lift them up and dump the fuel out. On those units, the best thing you can buy is the $3 inline fuel shutoff. And when you get ready to store them, what I like to do is I'll dump the fuel out of the weed eater or the chainsaw. And I'll start it up and let it run. The fuel is still in the line and still in the carburetor until it's completely gone. That way you don't have any of that varnish gunk that gets into the carburetor that screws everything up most of the time. With your snowblowers, your lawnmowers, with the inline fuel shutoff, start your unit up, whether it be a wood splitter, lawnmower, snowblower, and we can even get into the kids' toys like the go-karts and all that stuff. Is simply put a fuel inline shutoff, and while it's running, just turn the shut off to the off position, which is the directional. If it's going with the fuel, then it's open. If it's going against the fuel line, then it's closed. And I like to let it run until it completely runs out of fuel. That way you don't have any fuel left over sitting in there doing damage to your carburetor over periods of time. When I say periods of time, I mean 2, 3, 4 weeks at the very least, to 3 to 4 months during the off season. And this can even carry over to your summer toys, your outboards that you've been fishing with and stuff. Just simply start the unit up. Make sure you have muffs on it if it's not in the water, as not to take the water pump out. And get it running, and then unplug the fuel source from it and let it run until it dies. That's it. Now, with your outboards, you have a couple other things that you have to do when you're servicing them for the fall through the winter, and that is the drain plug on the lower unit. I recommend that you change it every year. And usually in the fall of the year, I'll open that plug up and let all it out. And why I say the fall of the year is because if you have a seal that's going bad in there, you're going to get water. And what happens to water when it freezes? It expands and it will crack your lower unit. Seen it done umpteen times. Same thing goes for your pressure washers. Make sure that they are completely out of water. Because if you get any amount of water left inside that pump and you leave it where it can get cold, where it can freeze, it'll crack that cast housing. And I sell a lot of water pump housings, pressure washer pump housing, just for that reason alone. And this carries over to your snowmobiles, four-wheelers, the stuff that, With the sleds and the outboards, you can buy a fogging agent so that when it's still running and you spray it, that it will fog the unit and it'll keep the piston and rings with oil on them when they're sitting for long periods of time, so the rings don't seize up. Some of the things that I've seen over the years that you might just want to kind of watch out for, and that is, one of the best things I've ever seen is the cases that you can put your whole chainsaw in and lock up so that it doesn't get damaged and if it gets rolling around the back of the truck and so forth. But they're one of the worst things you can have for storage. And why do I say storage? Like during the summer months when it gets hot, especially, we get this all the time. A customer will bring in their chainsaw and it's sitting in one of those cases. And when you open the case, all you see is oil everywhere inside the case. And that's because inside that case, you're increasing the heat. And what happens to oil when you heat it up? It gets thinner. And chainsaw oil should be for your summer months. It's a thicker viscosity than your winter months where you want to get a lot lighter so that it comes out onto the chain. But during the summer months, if you're not using it and you have it stored in one of these cases and you've got it stored in the garage where it's not temperature controlled, guarantee you will run into one of those cases right full of oil. So how do you avoid it? Well, for one, I wouldn't put it in a case. Not for summer storage. If you got it in the garage somewhere, set it on a shelf. The best way to, if you want to store it in that case, the best way I would recommend is tip the saw upside down, drain all the bar oil out of it, and then store it that way. You're still going to get some left in there that's going to fill that case, but that should fix that issue right there. Fuel storage. Now, as I said in a prior video, that sometimes when you are pumping premium unleaded, that means without ethanol in it, you're not always getting premium unleaded. Because whoever was at that gas pump before you and what they used will dictate what comes out of that nozzle for the first quarter of a gallon. And that's from the nozzle down to the shutoff. Now, if it was me and I was ahead of you and I pulled up and I filled my truck, I'm going to run 87, all right? And that's ethanol. And then you pull up and you get your gas can out and you grab the nozzle and you start pumping because you've pushed 90. And this happens with the ones that you have up in our area. One side is diesel with a yellow handle, and then this handle over here covers the 87, 90, and 93 or 91, but the non-ethanol. Okay, so if somebody like me come up and I pump with 87 and then the pump shut off, now you pull up and you get your gas can out and you pump in a gallon of what you think is premium non-ethanol fuel, you're wrong. You just got 1/3 of a gallon of ethanol fuel in it, 87. So just be careful of that. One of the tips and tricks that I talk about of ways to avoid this is to have your vehicle right close by. Have your 1 gallon, 5 gallon, what have you. And now take the nozzle off after you've pressed for the non-ethanol. Pump a half gallon to a gallon into your vehicle so you know that what's coming out of that pump is the non-ethanol. Then put it into your fuel storage container, your gas can. That will help because we all know what happens when you get ethanol is that the fuel will actually draw moisture and you'll end up with water in your fuel. And I'll tell you, a lot of the equipment out there these days just are not made to be run on the ethanol. Ethanol does a lot of damage to carburetors, gaskets, everything. So that brings us to the next thing is fuel storage. How long is too long to store fuel if you have it on hand? Some people will go out and they'll buy, 5 gallons of fuel so they have it handy, especially if you have, like a gas-powered generator. So if you lose power, you always got 5 gallons on hand, plus what's in the tank, and so forth. Don't store, if you're running the ethanol fuel, you need to use it up. And I'm talking 2 to 3 weeks. And you're even pushing it at that. But what I'm not telling you is to dump that fuel out because it's no good. Put it in your vehicle. Put it in something that, will run fine on it. Whereas your small engines, your 2-strokes and your 4-strokes, will have issues with it because they're trying to fire on the ethanol and water with the gas. So that's the other thing it brings us to is you really got to know what equipment you're running and what the mixtures you want. So if you read on the tag and it says it's a 2-stroke engine, that means that there's no oil in the base, okay? That means you have to take the fuel and add an oil, and usually it's 50-1, but check the manufacturer recommendations. Now, what I recommend here at the shop is to run the synthetic grade fuel, the gas fuel mixture. I'm not going to say what brands are best or worse. I think they're all pretty much alike, that from what I've seen, we sell the Stens and the rotaries. So, but I do recommend synthetic because it's going to last you a lot longer. Now, if it says 4-stroke on it, what's the difference between a 2-stroke and a 4-stroke? Well, a 4-stroke has got oil in the base. And a lot of your weed eaters are coming out with being 4-strokes. Your outboards, wood splitters, lawnmowers, snow blowers, they have all got oil in the base to keep the piston and rings lubricated. Whereas the 2-stroke, you have to add the lubrication into the fuel so that the piston and rings are getting enough lubrication. Now I've seen, and I fault the stores more than I do the homeowners, but the homeowners, you got to read the directions. Now, I've seen a lot of even guys that are older that have run weed eaters for years assume that it's a 2-stroke, and they don't put any oil in where your engine oil should be for your 4-stroke and burn up a perfectly good weed eater and then go back to the store and tell them that it's not running right or it's not running at all. It's because you failed to follow directions and the store failed to give you the proper directions. And they usually have like a pint of oil that goes with it that is engine oil that you're supposed to add to your 4-strokes to make sure that you're getting proper lubrication. So you need to know what the difference is between a 2-stroke and a 4-stroke. And when it comes to 2-strokes, I highly recommend that you run the synthetic fuel mixture to oil mixture. And I would also recommend that you don't use the marine grade for your weed eaters, chainsaws, and all that stuff, or just the opposite for your marine. So hopefully this will make sense to some of you homeowners out there on how to store stuff and put it away during the off season. And then it's all ready to go when you're ready to go. It's easy peasy. On that note, you guys have a great day. If you like what you see here, please like and subscribe. and share with your friends so that we can grow the channel, get more people involved. All right. Catch you later.